I'm Kyle Russell, a writer at TechCrunch. I'll be moderating the panel. I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
My name is Greg Hartrell. I'm the lead product manager for Google Play Games.
My name is Brian Shih. I work on the product team at Pocket Gems, which is a mobile gaming company here in San Francisco.
And I'm Jean-Christophe Cimetiere, go by JC, and I'm with Unity running marketing activities for the company, and Unity is a game engine, as probably most of you know.
So, since we all have mics, you don't have to take turns talking. I thought it'd be nice to do this in a kind of conversational style rather than going, by scripted points. So, we kind of talked about topics that we'd like to go over. Let's start, I guess, with the emergence of new platforms that are kind of related to the mobile platforms that we have today. So, with Android, you've got Chromecast is available. You've got Android TV coming up. With Amazon, the Fire TV is coming out. Apple, who knows what they're doing with Apple TV. How do you guys see the relationship between the mobile games we have today and the new experiences that are going to emerge with these new platforms?
I can start being the resident Googler. I think what's fascinating about where we sit in kind of game development today is the industry has dabbled in, we'll call it what we used to call second screen experiences in a variety of manners. We had portable devices trying to connect to TVs. We had other types of devices trying to play nicely with each other. And we had this era where we took advantage of a growing ubiquity of the internet to connect people and have them playing together. I think when I look at particularly the Android ecosystem with 1 billion active devices, the announcement of Android TV and the announcement of a lot of different form factors in which Android's going to run on, we're probably in the best position ever to realize a lot of those second screen scenarios where you can walk into anybody's home and start to just play a game with the device that's in your pocket, and you could start pick up where they left off or share state. There's a whole series of we'll call it location centric experiences, most commonly associated with the living room, but you can even project further where televisions in public areas and whatnot are capable of playing games. So the bar games, trivia games, and some of those form factors were very custom or maybe even inaccessible to a number of different entertainment venues. And I think that we'll just see the emergence of those platforms penetrate those types of venues in addition to the living room and create a lot of fantastic game experiences as a result.
Yeah, I can offer a developer perspective. I think we're really excited about the advent of wearables, second screens. I think it's a really exciting time, obviously, to be in the industry. I think having said that, for us at least, it's hard enough getting a really good game to work natively on mobile as is and making that successful. So for us, we're really focused on making the best possible, most fun, best possible experience, most fun game for smartphones and tablets. But we're definitely keeping a close eye on these things. I think we're really excited to see where it goes. And right now, we're just focusing on smartphone and tablet experiences.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting challenge for developers, because when you see all those new form factors and possible experiences, multi-screen and so on, which one do you choose? You have so many opportunities, and when you are a small studio, or even a bigger studio, it's a lot of investment to go around all those platforms. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on as providing a game engine, is making sure that those opportunities are basically more accessible for all developers. And of course, if you want to target a platform very specifically, going native is one of the ways, but then you're sort of blocked and locked in an ecosystem and missing out on potential other opportunities. And one of the things is we've seen is that many developers are actually making a living of looking at what's being successful on other platforms and quickly replicate it on other platforms. So as you build your strategy as a game developer, it's really important that you start looking, okay, where do I want to be good first, and making sure that you deliver the great experience, because the bar is very high. So that's why also sometimes it's interesting to go to a new ecosystem and be one of the first, where the bar is going to be a little lower and where the competition is going to be a little less, but also we can also find a lot of support from the platform provider, because they're looking for content, and then if you bring pretty good content, they're going to promote you. But still, as you make those decisions, it's important to, from the beginning, try to think about, okay, where do I go next? Or where should we go if we are successful on the first platform? Because if this is an afterthought, that becomes really challenging to start thinking, to start implementing those decisions and going across all those opportunities. And there are so many. I mean, every day, not every day, but every quarter we have a new platform, or a platform vendor releases a new device with a new form factor enabling other experiences. So we see that from the tool provider, and you're super busy talking to those different providers working on the next generation projects, and it's so many things. The hard part is choosing. There's nothing we can do for you. We just offer the technology, and then you pick what's working.
So in the living room, you're competing on multiple fronts. You've got regular television. People spend, on average in America, several hours per day on the couch just watching whatever they're going to watch. You're also competing with game consoles in the more traditional sense, Xbox, your PlayStation. And the thing about that is, when most people think of console gaming, I think they think of the AAA experience. They're thinking, blockbuster tentpole titles. Relevant to mobile developers, how do you create experiences that can draw attention away from, if you're going to be in the living room, draw attention away from those experiences that people are used to or expect?
I think there's just a difference between the use cases, like on a smartphone or on a tablet, than being in your living room. And I think actually that's why we believe, at least, that building mobile-first, mobile-exclusive titles is the right way to go. I think actually if you look at some of history where people have taken titles that worked really well on one platform and just ported them to another, like back when StarCraft was popular, I think Blizzard put it out on the N64, and it didn't do very well because it didn't really make a lot of sense. They didn't take into account the control scheme not working. And so I think for us, focusing on building the best possible experience designed for mobile is the right way to compete in a sense against like the living room market share. And I think if you look at one of our more recent products episode, it was our take on mobile first storytelling. It's like, if we imagine storytelling as a mobile first app, what does that look like? And it's a product that lets you engage with stories like in bite-sized chunks. There's a platform for authors to write and get their stories published, and it's designed kind of in a way that could only exist on mobile. Like it couldn't exist on the Kindle, or it didn't make sense on PC. So I think that's the right approach, is like really focusing on like what makes mobile unique and tailoring your product to that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the right approach, and what we've seen also with successful developers, because even if the technology you pick lets you go across many platforms, if your gameplay is not appropriate, if you have nothing unique, or it's kind of even weird because it was designed for the phone, and then suddenly you have a remote controller and you're like, it doesn't feel right. So, but that's super interesting to see that now all those possibilities are here. So now developers, when they build games, they should think about, wow, okay, now what if I have a second screen? What if I'm 10 feet away, I can see my game on the big screen? Maybe it's not the full gameplay that needs to be totally changed. It's just adding experiences, and you can take a simple game made for a phone or tablet experience, and then you think about what would be that game if we have all those options. And then porting becomes, okay, now I know what I'm going to do, so porting makes sense. But if you just port because the technology lets you do it, that's probably not a waste, but could be if it's a lot of work. So think about it,
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of the perspectives that I heard here. I think my perspective too is that the economies of scale compared to what we had in kind of the heyday of the console biz are different, right? I mean, we used to be very impressed with tens of millions of consoles sold and how many living rooms we were in and whatnot, and we're talking about billions of devices now. Like your orders of magnitude larger, and so when you think about that for a second, I would say that the AAA market is very well covered, very well served in terms of like the content that they want to get access to, and the evidence are from anybody who owns one of those consoles and is getting kind of like the deep immersive hundreds of hours of gameplay experiences. But when you have an ecosystem this large, the other perspective is there's pockets of users that are underserved. Right, and you can see examples of games even in the mobile ecosystem that are succeeding, that cater to different demographics, cater to a different pace of play, a different lifestyle of play. And I think part of getting a successful strategy, either transitioning from living room to mobile and mobile to living room and blending in between, is really understanding who you're trying to what kind of experience you're making and who's that going to cater to. And to kind of plus what my colleagues were saying is some areas are ripe for opportunity, whereas other ones are going to be more competitive. And so I think your strategy has to be decide, are you going to compete or are you going to find that blue ocean, so to speak?
So kind of riffing off of the concept of control schemes, last year at WWDC, Apple made the made for iPhone controller standard for iOS. With the Fire TV, the Android TV, controllers are going to be in the living room running, Android-powered consoles. Do you think that developers should be focusing on, rolling out controller support in their games? Is it worth it at this point? I mean, it's in the OS, but I don't know anyone who has a controller for their iPhone yet. I've seen people in YouTube videos who've hacked together a Bluetooth controller to work with their Android phone, but I've never seen anyone actually using one. Do you think that we're at the point yet where it might be worth it to start considering it as a secondary control scheme, or is it still just not really there yet ecosystem-wise?
Well, I think it really depends on what the game is. I've seen a few car driving games on mobile, and I played with a controller attached to it. It makes such a difference. The game becomes, for me, really fun to play, as opposed to trying to steer the car with on-screen controller, which is kind of weird for me. I mean, as a gamer, I didn't like it. I like the joystick experience. Many of the games, really the controller experience just doesn't give anything, just is awkward. So once again, it's really the matter of does it make sense? And if it makes sense, yeah, I mean, you should do it, because once again, the technology usually is not that hard. It's a simple SDK you add, and then do a little changes, test it, and you're good to go. And it's once again another way to differentiate your game, and you do some promotion. And even if it's just a few YouTube videos that shows really cool scenario, it may go viral and then helps your game be known. And even if just a few percentage of your gamers are using it, I think it's a good investment.
Yeah, I'll plus that. I mean, when you look at the evolution of input mechanisms as well, there's still examples of games where people develop a preference depending on the style of game that was made. I mean, take a look at a franchise like Street Fighter. I'll still meet people who insist on using the classic, JAMA cabinet, controller, and yet you'll find a generation of people who are like, no, you can play Street Fighter with a traditional gamepad. Just watch me do something really weird. And you'll see those two camps war. We had a little bit of this war with first-person shooters, people playing on PCs and then on consoles, and there was the debate about, it's more accurate on a PC with a mouse. Remember this argument? It's still going, right? And so if you take that pattern and you apply it to mobile, we saw a lot of really innovative games, kind of when touch became the lowest common denominator, right? So, I look at a game like Fruit Ninja. Right, that game wouldn't have been made on any other prior console because just the nature of input was just so natural. And I think when you think about living room strategy in the future, my guidance would be figure out what the lowest common denominator is. Then the game that you develop has to exploit the natural ability to approach that device. I wouldn't use gamepads necessarily as your archetype because they're, as a mass market device, they're kind of scary to people. Hand one to, a kid or to your mom, and they're like, what do I do with it? And then when you explain to them, no, you just press the A button. Everything's great. But it's much more natural when they can just pick up a remote, start tapping, explore their way. Much more natural when they can touch the screen. And going after the lowest common denominator, I think, is your best strategy in a world where perceptibly you're going to be very fragmented.
Yeah, I actually really agree. I mean, I think your point about the wars between PC controls and console controls. It's like you can even sort of see it on mobile now, where I think there are a lot of attempts at making like League of Legends or Dota type titles on mobile, right? And fundamentally, I think the issue with them, or one of the issues with them, is that the controls aren't appropriate for mobile, right? You
virtual D-pads.
Yeah, you have virtual D-pad, or you're like trying to manage 3 abilities over here while microing your hero. It's not the same as a mouse and keyboard, and so I think that's kind of going back to the point of you just have to be sure what you're trying to build. Like if you're trying to build for an experience where somebody's pulling out a phone from in their pocket and playing while they're at a bus stop, like that's just fundamentally different than if I'm sitting with the controller, looking at a TV. So I think it really just matters who the user you're trying to build for is.
So I think you made a good point, which is choosing the lowest denominator, common denominator, and then building for that. And then after, choosing the options that maybe can differentiate yourself. Maybe that's one way to look at it. It's, okay, I want to make sure I cover all the scenarios that are available on all the devices I want to target and bring those additional things that I can differentiate myself. And I think that's the best strategy. The other one is just to pick all those kind of exceptional scenarios that are super interesting but not applicable for a large part of the population. But then you go for those scenarios and you do a game that works only with a phone and a game controller. And you may have something super appealing with a small set of the population, but if you get all those people, maybe that's enough for you to make a living. So it's, once again, making the decision where you want to go and stick to it, and if you're convinced that's the right one, then sure, go ahead. But being in between is probably not the right thing to do, yeah.
So, okay, now going off of lowest common denominator, nowadays we can expect that a big chunk of users are going to have LTE or access to Wi-Fi wherever they are. I think a big part of the rise of social gaming was this understanding of like asynchronous gameplay and saying like, okay, you can take your turn whenever, and I can play with all my friends all the time because I'm playing with like one or two of them right now. But lately, as you mentioned with MOBAs, now that League of Legends and Dota 2 are all anyone can talk about, we're starting to see what was it, Fates Forever, and now there's going to be a Witcher MOBA, and Vainglory I think is coming from EA. And now also with Hearthstone, for instance, it's not real-time gameplay. It's not quite turn-based. It's you're taking turns, but it's like, hey, you better play in the next 30 seconds. Do you think that developers need to start moving towards more real-time gameplay, or like are people going to start expecting that? And what kind of factors do you need to start including when you're thinking of like infrastructure, when you start building for that kind of environment?
Yeah, it's definitely something we're thinking a lot about. I definitely don't think asynchronous gameplay is going away. I think there will always be a place for that. But I do think that we see real-time synchronous multiplayer is becoming more and more important, especially as you have more hardcore users turning to their phones to play games as well. And so we've definitely invested a lot in building tech for the future to support this real-time. And I think it's fundamentally a different case than like when you're on your computer on Wi-Fi, right? Like network connections are spotty. I go into a tunnel and I drop out, and or like I temporarily switch networks or things. So there's also things you have to account for, and so we put a lot of work into a network layer that allows us to like automatically handle disconnects, handle like pauses, and catching up and lag and things like that. And I think that's something that more people are going to be excited about on mobile, and so we're definitely investing in it for the future. And I think a lot of our upcoming titles are going to be at least have some component of real time.
I think I agree. That's a trend, and definitely we've seen developers asking us as a technology provider to help them find solutions. So we're actually working on some of those solutions. We've started to share some of the things we call UUNet. So right now it's kind of a code name of some technology we're developing to really enable real-time gaming for developers and take care of some of the things you mentioned, like caching, pausing, and synchronizing the states across devices. So, but definitely there's a need for that. I don't think it's going to replace the other kind of gaming scenarios for many reasons. And networking is not available every time, everywhere, for everyone. Teenagers, some have data plans, others don't. Or when they have one, it's usually limited. So, and there could be a target for gaming, real-time gaming. But so many things are to be considered. I think they're not excluding. It's just more options to have as a developer.
Yeah, just to build on that, everything I agree with. I'd say that the theme is what mode of consumption your player is going to be in. I mean, you're sitting with a mobile device in the line at a Starbucks. Your 2-minute gameplay asynchronous approach is always going to win. But in a world where you see your mode of consumption is I'm sitting in a living room. It's a Friday night. I'm going to play a game for an hour or longer. You can afford the luxury of engaging somebody in a way that they can be sitting there for a while and not have the constant disconnects and kind of what sometimes this is like the Byzantine generals problem, right, of people dropping out and coming back in. You just don't have a pleasant experience. And I think part of what I see happening in the ecosystem is you get developers who are very savvy at figuring out how to even feign a real-time experience, even though there's still very much an asynchronous type of experience going on. So you kind of have like this built-in fault tolerance, but you have the pleasure of getting the appearance of real-time gameplay, and I think that that's an interesting area to explore as well.
So with specs in phones and tablets increasing by leaps and bounds every year, it seems like, and with engines like Unreal and Unity offering amazing features for graphics, and with Metal coming out and optimizations in Android for improved graphics performance, are gamers going to start expecting more from our mobile experiences? I mean, like for instance, are you investing in like more artists than before? Or are you like figuring out how to put fancy shaders into games that didn't need them before? How is that influencing like the future direction of where games are going?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely across the board. Like the quality bar is going up, like you said. I think 3D, like real-time 3D, is certainly becoming a bigger and bigger thing, especially as the hardware can support it. And we've been investing a lot in our own 3D engine to support that. I think none of our prior games have it, but I think a title coming out this year is going to be in 3D. And we really see that as like the future. I think the expectation, you can sort of look at console, PC, and you can kind of draw your own conclusions like, well, over time the hardware got better, everyone just sort of expected everything to be in 3D. And while I think there will still be a place for non-3D games, I think like a lot of the like AAA titles on mobile, right, like are going to be in 3D, and it's something that we're investing heavily in.
So from a pure technology standpoint, we're super excited to see that on mobile coming, because high-end graphics was really the space reserved for console and PC gaming, and so that's the technology we've been delivering. We've all been trying to help developers to bring their content down to small devices, but it's always a choice you have to make. Oh, I have to kill that quality, I have to downgrade my shaders, I have to change the quality of the assets. So it's exciting to see that now it's going to be almost, okay, you use the same thing, it's going to go down to your tablet or phone. Although, do you really want to spend time putting those titles that were on console and PC to your phone? Because is it the gameplay that's going to work? I'm not sure. And then if you want to be successful on mobile and tablet, super high-end graphics, is it the kind of gamer you're really going to play your game? And you see some very successful titles at the top of the charts right now. How many of them are super high-end quality graphics games? Not that many. I mean, at least half of them are very basic, super simple, addictive, well done, but they don't need that power. So what are we going to do with that power? It's yet to be discovered, but it's still a trend that is super, super exciting.
Yeah, I think my perspective is the way every generation of game console and game platform kind of went through this, where there was like, oh, we're more powerful now, therefore there's going to be better graphics. Oh, it's going to be awesome. Everybody's going to have high definition 3D meshes everywhere, and we're going to be running around, in these really high definition worlds. And what I think ends up happening is you hit this apex, and you'll see, as a platform maker, we're dedicated to that. We announced like the Android extension pack, right, for OpenGL, and we're committed to like high performance games in general. But there's other constraints, right? The constraints are things like we haven't seen a step function in battery technology yet. Right, so you can start cranking out a lot of very high-end in games on some of these devices, but your experience is not going to be all that great on a tablet. Maybe you only get minutes of gameplay, if not an hour. But the apex ends up becoming like you reach a point where graphics can only make your game so much more interesting before you have to get back to fundamentals. There's plenty of games both on mobile, and we see this in the console biz too, right? Where I'll just call out Nintendo as an example of where they're building fantastic games that don't bet on very high-end, graphics experiences, and they're creating fantastic, mass-market titles that reach large audiences and doing pretty well. And so when I look at mobile and I take a look at where we're headed, you'll start to see like a quality bar creep. But I think quality is a mix of not just like what are the level of graphics that we're bringing to our users, but also is like, what's the level of gameplay? What are the mechanics fundamentally fun? Are we bringing them new and exciting things, or are we just starting to fall into the weathered patterns of old or things that we feel like that are safe? So I think quality is going to have to be a mix of a lot of things that compete with each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we I think again, it goes back to like who are the users you're targeting. I think for a lot of casual gamers, they may not care, or it may be a secondary thing for them, right? Like you could make a Candy Crush that's not in 3D, it doesn't matter, it's still going to be fun. But I do think a lot of people on mobile, including us, are trying to target more mid-core audiences. You see, like the MOBAs we were talking about, right? Like as somebody who comes from PC and plays a MOBA, like, and I want to play something comparable to that on phone or tablet, I sort of have an expectation in my head for like what the graphic bar is, and it might be higher than something for a casual game. So I think it really just depends on like who you're targeting, and for us, for the games that are more hardcore, or more PvP oriented, I think it can add a lot there.
And I guess the flip side of this issue is that, as you're talking, the size of the market is so much bigger now with mobile. You're not talking about, oh, we sold 50 million consoles, so this was a huge success. It's like, no, that's how many iPhones are shipping in a quarter. Like, I mean, the vast majority of the market isn't, most people aren't using the latest device. There's hundreds of millions of people who are using mid-tier or lower devices. So how do you do, like, I guess what's the cost-benefit analysis look like for, do we try and have this like flagship title that everyone knows about and a third of our audience, a fifth of our audience can play, or do you go for, aim for the lowest common denominator and say we want to hit as many people as possible?
I think so. It's basically like the fragmentation question, right? I think it's not like a new thing, right? Like on PCs, we've been having to deal with that for forever. Like you can't accept everyone can't be expected to have like the top of the line PC. So we actually do a lot of different things to try and account for that, because the goal is to get the most fun experience possible for all the players, and we can change the performance characteristics on a device to match, to give them the best possible experience. So one thing that we do is we'll record FPS data for different devices automatically in the wild and calculate CPU scores, memory scores, like how much memory does this device have, and then we can kind of process that offline and say, okay, well, it looks like the FPS is kind of low on these lower end devices. Like what if we reduce the texture size, or flag this feature off, and so there's fewer animations, and there's all sorts of tricks you can do to kind of tailor the experience, and then we kind of ship that and look and say, oh, the FPS is back up, and so it's sort of a balance between looking at the data and saying, okay, we believe this is like a solid experience, and then also testing it ourselves in-house on a bunch of different devices and saying, if I turn off all the animations, is this game still fun? Like, is it even a game at all at that point? But I think there's a lot of smart things you can do, and it's not limited to any one platform, right? I think even if you were only shipping on iOS, there's different devices there, there's older generation devices, and so you have to do this no matter what you're doing on mobile.
Well, actually, just really quickly, is that proprietary tech that you're using for measuring, FPS across a series of devices?
Yeah, that's actually stuff that we built in-house to monitor and process.
So, what's Unity's philosophy on
everything you describe is exactly the right thing to do. Now, how you do it, it's up to you. You have your own tech engine, and that's you guys can do that. That's awesome because you're totally free to go whenever you want, do whatever, tweak it. So although Unity lets its customer to license the source code if they want and go that far, that's also a possibility. But we try to add more and more in the engine features that really makes it easier for developers to realize, okay, what's going on when the games are out there, how to measure, how to do profiling. I think we have pretty good profiling tools so that when you do your own testing on different devices, you can see, okay, this is really too slow on that low-end devices, so it's hitting too much memory and stuff like that. So it is definitely a problem to solve, and there's no magic bullet, and you have to be smart about, okay, how do I downgrade the experience to a point that it's still a great experience. And no matter what engine you use, I think it's just a good conception architecture in the beginning, so that you think about it first and you realize, okay, the high-end devices are that, the low-end are this. Am I trying to find some numbers on those market shares, and then targeting where you want to go? But I think if your game is premium content, a paid game, maybe you're going to target only high-end devices. If your strategy is more free-to-play, then you can go down to lower tier level. What I've seen actually in previous activities was that the low-end devices, barely anybody buy content, but they download free-to-play games. And then what happens after? Sometimes you don't know, because as a platform provider, you cannot see what's going on, but you know there's advertising, there's some in-app purchase also. But then on the high-end devices, yeah, people who pay for high-end devices, they also buy more content. So depending on where you want to go, you can skip the low-end devices and be only on the high-end and sell the game and maybe add-ons and be successful.
So maybe my contribution to this won't be, yes, profile devices understand what you're targeting. I think what's interesting, like no other time before in video games, and I think we take this for granted, is in all prior generations, platform makers handed you a demographic in a box, right? So it kind of did the work for you. You kind of knew who was innately going to buy the device and have it in their living room. And then we started to broaden. Today, what we're dealing with is everybody's a gamer now, right? Like there's grandmothers playing video games, there's kids playing video games. When I grew up playing video games, and I sound like an old bastard when I say this, but when I grew up playing video games, like you were a nerd, right? Like, what are you doing playing video games, right? Like, and there was kind of like this isolated group of people. We're a lot more analogous now to let's say more traditional entertainment industries now, right? Like, you don't hear people talk in the music industry talking about this because it's long gone. There's genres, there's niche markets, and then there's mass market song content. Television's the same way, right? Nobody talks about like I don't know UFC the way that they talk about like nighttime TV dramas on Mondays, right? Like they're not equivalent content, and so I think when you project like and how we'll go back to the economies of scale thing, when you got billions of people playing games and everybody's effectively a gamer, there's a market out there for you. The trick is to figure out, are you going to target the high-end devices? Are you catering to somebody who's looking for your Ultimate Fighting Championship type of pay-per-view type of experience? Or in the music industry, I guess you could describe that as like your more subgenres, but they're very passionate about their subgenre and they're looking for that content. Or are you going to go mass market and you're going to try to cater to the broadest set of users with the lowest common denominator? And there's no better strategy between those two. They're different, and the way you execute on those and how you choose to bring your content to those will differ in that future.
So shifting gears a little bit, one of the things I wanted to talk about was software or the tools that go into creating online identities, things like leaderboards, your persistent identity in an online game. Every platform owner obviously wants to have some level of lock-in. Apple and Google and now Android and Windows all have your Game Center ID or your Amazon ID or your Xbox Live ID. But at the same time, we're now talking about experiences that bounce from your phone to your tablet to your whatever is hooked up to your TV. Is it worth it to go the easy route, I guess, and go with lock-in, or are you guys looking now at third-party identity systems, or maybe creating your own so that people are tied into maybe the publisher's system? I mean, how do you guys even think about that?
Sure. So I think generally, even if we get at a higher level than just identity systems, I think we believe that mobile games need to be more intelligent, kind of generally, in the sense that your users are playing on multiple devices. People behave very differently. There's different demographics of users. Like a single game like Paradise Cove can have people who really love PvP and people who really love exploring and never want to fight other people, right? So having the tools and the data to kind of figure out what kind of players you are and catering this experience to them seamlessly is really important for games as a service. So I think kind of generally across the board, we believe in building intelligent backend systems to do this. I think specifically for identity, we looked and there wasn't a single identity provider that we could use across platform because we do ship our games on Android and iOS. We looked at Facebook, but I think we couldn't really count on everyone having a Facebook account or wanting to log in with a Facebook account. So we ended up building our own system that lets us, it's not really about lock-in, it's more providing the best experience to the player where, if I'm playing on my iOS device and then I create an account with Pocket Gems, I can then load it up on my Android tablet and my game state is shared. We transfer your purchases, all the things that you would expect to happen. And it was important for us to do that to support the best experience for the player. And yes, that's why we built it, because there wasn't really anything that we could easily use.
Yeah, I think it's the right thing to do. How you do it. I think there's a benefit in plugging into the platform ID system because it gets you some recognition. on some platform. It's actually a small club on Xbox, on Windows Phone, Windows. If you score the Xbox Live integration network, you're pretty good because you're going to be promoted and it's going to bring you some attention, promotion in the store. So definitely there are many benefits. And on other platforms, I mean, people are so used. If you have an iOS device, you're in Game Center, and then every time there's a game, you're connected and you have your social network on that network. So, I mean, it's a tough choice. I think if you're new and you're launching, that's probably safer and easier to start plugging into every platform dedicated network, because that's going to give you a lift. And then as you become more confident, then yeah, sure, build your backend, get more intelligent. And if you have multiple games, then it's important to try to either cross-promote across, and that can help. But I would advise developers to think about it twice, because it's tempting to build your own thing and say, yeah, I'm going to have my backend. But I guess it's not that easy, right?
No, it's definitely not that easy. And just to add one thing, like we also do integrate with the native ones as well. So we use Game Center on iOS. I think we use Google Achievements or Google Play Achievements. So you can do both. It's just more around the specific idea of the identity that we needed something that could work across all the platforms.
Yeah, so as the platform guy, fundamentally, I think what we're also critiquing here is, on the open internet, we haven't done a very good job as platform makers to solve identity in general. Mm-hmm. Totally different topic. I think we can all agree that it's like nobody really likes the idea of like, okay, it's kind of like me, the equivalent of pulling out like my keychain and flipping through every key. Which one opens this door? And it's like, am I logging in with Facebook? Am I logging in with Google? Am I logging in with Apple? And I think it's practically speaking, it's the right strategy to say that when you're on the platform that you're on, go with the account that is the most frictionless experience that you can bring to your users. Google, is a general statement, just to be a little bit defensive here, is we do try to be as open as possible, right? So you'll notice that when you look at our API surface, you can access all of our game APIs on Android, iOS, and the web. All the REST APIs are available. We have SDKs for all the various variants of web-based programming languages to facilitate that. That said, as platform makers, and I'll just say this is like a self-criticizing thing, is that we need to do a better job of federating identity in general, and that would not only add benefits to the games biz, but it would also add benefits just to the internet at large. It's not closing out identity doesn't really help people.
So something we talked about, or barely touched on earlier, was the idea of things that are doing really well on one platform, quickly adapting them to other platforms. You see, Flappy Bird takes off on iOS, and 50 clones show up on Windows Store, and next day they're on Android. But one thing about that, or related topic along with that I'd like to talk about is choosing which platforms you go on, because now with modern engines, it's pretty easy to show up on everything at once, basically, with some minor changes for each. But is there an advantage to picking a platform and I guess like owning it, or picking a smaller ecosystem, for instance, and being like the killer app for it, or is it better to be known across the board?
I would say as much as possible, if you can ship on all, if you've picked mobile, phone or tablet or whichever, because I think the gameplay and the form factor is important, but assuming you have picked one form factor, optimized for it, it's better to be across the platforms at the same time, because that will give you the best exposure possible. But it is challenging, and I think the most challenging actually is not necessarily porting the game and adapting the little platform characteristics. At this point, it's more, what is your monetization strategy across all those platforms? Because you may not do the same thing on those platforms. I've seen many games, they are kind of maybe small price and then some add-ons on iOS, and they're free on Android, but then there's more in-app purchase. And then on Windows Phone, they show up with a very high price because nobody will buy it, and then so the few who buy it may pay higher, or maybe they think Windows Phone users have more money, or whatever. And I'm using a particular example I have in mind, but I've seen developers really thinking hard, okay, how might I do that? And sometimes, why is it not the same across the platform as a consumer? But those decisions are really hard to make. And so if you go across platforms, you have to be ready also to work that and also fight the thing that, okay, on this platform, this advertising SDK is the best one. On that other platform, I'm using that other advertising SDK because maybe it's not available, or I pick one because it's going to be simpler, but I'm losing money because I know on those platforms there are better solutions. So it's a tricky one, but as much as possible, I think being across platform is definitely the best option.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think that if you have the resources to get on all platforms and you have high degrees of confidence in your title's ability to perform on them, then getting across all of them immediately is a great strategy. But I think some of this is me being biased. Google, we're a very experimental type of company where we want to be data driven. We try different things before we go big on a lot of things. And I think I'm seeing that with some of the most savvy game developers where they'll focus, like the philosophy is, more wood behind fewer arrows. Pick a platform, get focused on it, understand the nuances of it, perfect the game, and then once you build confidence around that, then you can use your scarce resources to start to spread out to other ones. That seems to be working for developers large and small, and I can't stress the benefits of experimenting and kind of understanding what's working and iterating and paying attention to your customers before you decide to go everywhere all at once.
I can just offer, as a developer, from our viewpoint, I think when we're talking about mobile platforms, iOS and Android, for us, I think it's like a false dichotomy at this point to have to choose one or the other to ship on first, especially with tools like Unity, a portable. It certainly was true probably 2 or 3 years ago that if you did kind of have to choose because it wasn't as easy then. And I remember when we shipped our first Android title, we hand ported it, and it was a nightmare. But now with modern tools, it's really easy. There's really no reason not to. And so all of our more recent titles have shipped on both platforms, and we intend to do that going forward.
So the next topic I'd like to go to is a little bit wonkier. So let's try to keep it light. So talking about big data and analytics, I think those topics kind of scare smaller developers. I mean, a big company can develop their own proprietary systems for measuring performance across a wide range of devices. They can see what works with all kinds of fancy A/B testing. For smaller developers, what are the important things to focus on, things that are easier to measure, things that they can get to and have actionable things to work on that don't require those vast resources to get to?
Well, I haven't looked at what third-party A/B testing tools exist out there. I think there are probably pretty good tools for doing that at this point, where you can build features out and test and just see, kind of look at your key metrics around, are people engaging with this feature? Are they spending money on this feature? I imagine that it's fairly easy. That's a pretty standard use case. I think generally I think the topic of data in game design is actually pretty interesting in general, because I sort of see it as a spectrum. It's sort of a push and pull on how much to use data when designing your game, right? I think in the console days, you sort of had this model where, okay, you'd spend millions of dollars in 3 years and you'd build this title and then you'd ship it and hope for the best. And then kind of when social games came along, we kind of veered way, way far onto the other end where, we have a game idea, it doesn't really matter, and then we're going to use data to pivot that into the best game, and we believe that that's going to make a successful game, and it kind of sucks the fun out of it. And so on the topic of data, we generally believe it's a balance between the two, right? I think one way to put it is fun driven but data informed, right? You have a fun idea, you believe this can be a fun game and a great experience, and then you use data to inform and to validate or disprove your hypotheses about, are people actually engaging with this feature? Do they find this fun? Are they spending money? I guess to answer your question, it's I don't feel like that there's a lot of stuff that a smaller developer can't do with kind of off-the-shelf A/B testing tools. It's more the philosophy around having being confident in having a fun game and then using data to validate whether your assumptions are true or not. The only thing that we can do that a smaller developer can't do is we can just build more sophisticated data processing, better dashboards. We collect tons and tons of data from users, so automatically processing that and making it more easily consumed by all the people in the company is like something that's a little bit harder to do as a smaller developer. But in terms of using data to inform your design, I think anybody can do that and should.
I would say anybody must do that if you're if you're serious about, unless you're a hobbyist and you're just throwing your game out there just because you like that. Sure, you don't need analytics, you don't care. But if you're really serious, if you want to make a living, that's your job. You cannot ship without any analytics. This is just crazy stupid because it goes out, it works, great. Why does it work? I don't know. People like it. Yeah, sure. And it doesn't work? Why? I don't know. It doesn't work. So people download it, but they play 5 minutes, or you don't even know how long they play, and then they never come back. Why? So that's really, and there's so many solutions that exist, free services that provide basic SDK, and as a platform provider, as an engine provider, we have acquired a company called Playnomics 2-3 months ago, which is an analytics company, to even bring more capabilities inside the engine for developers, so that sort of right out of the box, they'll have basic analytics so that they don't have to shop for too many complex things. But regardless the way you do it, definitely just do it. This is not, unless you're not serious about it. And many people are just having fun, and then they have success. Like, oh, shit, I should do something now because it's successful. Then they move after. But if you're serious, no, do it, really.
Yeah, just to build on it, if there's still if you're in a place where there's still a debate of whether you should be using data to make decisions, that debate's over. You have to be using analytics. But to plus what I heard earlier is that there's still no metric for fun, right? Somebody invents that, they should patent it. But the reality is that people play games, they come for an entertainment experience, ultimately. You got to get them in the door. Data will help you inform how to improve things, but you got to start with the premise that I have something that people actually will want to play, and then you can use data to kind of refine the edges around there. To kind of plus it, if you're somebody small and you can't invest in those types of platforms, I'll plug a little bit of what Google does right now. The developer console on through Google Play provides a lot of these basic analytics out of the box, even for game developers where we have game services. So we'll give you daily active users, we'll give you engagement and retention data, basically kind of your staple metrics. And my best advice if you're a small developer and you're saying, hey, how do I break into this, is avoid your vanity metrics. Nobody cares how many users you got in total. What matters is are people sticking around? Are you getting real feedback from them? Like, do they like your game? Do they not like your game? Are you retaining them? Are you making money? Like, focus on like the core, like what's literally called the key performance, indicators, the KPIs. Pick those, focus them on them militantly, and then go back to basics and make sure that you're optimizing for fun.
It's funny. There's probably someone in the audience right now who's inside screaming like, "Games are art," and they're really upset with everyone up here. But that's a huge discussion. We could go into that, but not enough time. So I guess since we're running low, going forward, looking to the next year or two, or even over the next, if you're starting now with a new game development cycle, what trends, technologies would you be looking at and saying like, maybe we need to start thinking about this, start factoring this in? These are something like informing your next genre of game, even like what do we need to be looking for?
I think those are maybe two different questions. So I think in terms of, if I were a developer starting today from nothing, I would absolutely take advantage of all of the amazing tools that exist, like Unity. Like if I were by myself, I would probably go use Unity right away instead of building everything myself. I think at Pocket Gems, when we look further down the line, we sort of look at what's happened historically, again, like on PC and console, and we see, for people to create truly new experiences and things that people haven't even thought of yet, you inevitably have to start building some proprietary tech yourself. And like an example I like to point out is like EVE Online, right? Like EVE was not the first MMO, it's not the only MMO, but you couldn't go off the shelf and get some server software to run what they've done, right? Like where everyone is all on the same server and there's no sharding, right? And it's created a really awesome and unique experience that doesn't exist anywhere else, and they had to build that themselves. And I think you can see that same pattern on a lot of different games where companies have built out their own engines or their own proprietary tech to support a game, a like truly new game that hadn't been seen before. So I think for us, that's that's like the big reason that we're investing so much in our own tech, in 3D, in real time, in kind of these back-end services, because we think to build something like truly new and that hasn't been done on mobile, we're going to have to. So, long story short, I think definitely use use existing tools. But I think at some point, if you're in it for the long run, or you want to build like a really long-lasting games as a service company, you're going to have to start putting at least some effort into proprietary tech.
Well, there are obvious things like we mentioned the different screens, the large screen, the smaller screen, the kind of side scenarios, or even the wearables. Many things to imagine. I think I don't see them super mass market today, and just for simple reasons, which is connecting all those devices together or all those gadgets together. It is still very tricky because the big screen, whether the app runs on the screen or there's a little box or a bigger box, and then you connect an additional phone or tablet, it is for the end user. I mean, if you're a geek, sure you can do that, but you fight a little bit, and then my wife watches me and says, "What are you doing?" "No, hold on, it's gonna work." "Hold on, 5 minutes later, yeah, is it ready?" "Oh, hold on. So this is hard to achieve. So I think this is still interesting to explore, and the people who will be able to nail the right scenario, they'll be successful for sure. One thing I'd like developers to think about, because we've seen many developers being successful, also trying to look at the world really as not one world, but multiple worlds where you want to target a market. You have a game, your game should be different depending on where it goes. If it's in US, Europe, maybe it could be quite similar, but then as you go to Asia, it should be very different. But there's a possibility to be very successful, and that's some of the activities we're actually running from Unity China, is work with successful game developers that are successful in US or Europe, and work with them to build localized version. But when I say localized, it's really truly localized. Not just technical payment and so on, but also adapted content to make sure it can work. But when there's a good gameplay that works somewhere, it could work somewhere else with some tweaks. And I think it's also the world being totally open now. It's yours. Just do it right. It's not that easy, but it is definitely a possibility that developers should consider. I think it's exciting.
And then, not to rush you, but yeah, one quick statement.
Yeah, no, I'll cherry pick a couple things, right? One is I think we haven't cracked a very good social experience on mobile. When you look at people playing games together, they're still kind of staring at a screen and kind of in very isolated experiences. I'm really excited about some of the things going on with just like location in general, right? I think that we can do a better job of getting like a room of people like this playing a game together, very quickly. So that would be one. The other one, I'll just plus the localization side, this is more of like a midterm type of thing. We're at a stage now where even being hyper local might be interesting, right? I'm seeing more developers do things like, here's my downloadable content pack for this region in Asia, and it's some landmark that everybody happens to recognize in an area. It won't sell very well anywhere else. But it's a way for them to reach like their audience in a very unique way, and in a way that's pleasurable to those users. So that there's some blue ocean there to explore as well.
Great. So I think with that, we're about out of time.
We have time for one question if the audience has something a really interesting question. First, hands up at the front. I'll bring the mic over for the benefit of the camera. Make it a good one.
For sure. So I have a few statements to make, but I'm not sure it's a true statement. So I think that the majority of players on mobile are casual gamers, and most of the hardcore gamers from the console generation who are now in college or a bit into society. And then the younger generation demographic of middle school to high school, and who doesn't really have a high-end mobile device. So that being said, do you think it's worth it to make a high-end graphic hardcore games for mobile, and why?
I think at this stage, games of that ilk are succeeding largely on tablet devices because they happen to have a larger screen. They generally have more resources. So you can see a number of examples from there. If you're talking about like true like hardcore games, like I'll take like an example, any war simulator that you can think of on console. And when I mean war simulator, I mean like hyper real, or even games like I'm a fan of like the Hitman series. There's a Hitman on mobile, but it caters in a very specific way to the types of gameplay and the lifestyle that I have. I'm a fan of that game, even though it is not the same kind of experience that I get on a console side. So I think at this stage in the industry, you're going to pursue that strategy because you're going to target a smaller group of people and you're able to reach them in a unique way. But as a prediction, as we get even more of these devices with a common operating system and in the living room and in a more ubiquitous way, you're going to see a shift in the desire for those premium experiences. Go back to like that analogy that I had of like nighttime TV dramas versus Ultimate Fighting Championship. There's still people who will pay $100 on a Saturday to watch two guys beat the living daylights out of each other, and that's the premium experience that they want, and that market will always exist, I think, in the video game business, regardless of the form factors and how we see things evolve. And that's when you see that tipping point, that's when you're going to want to reconsider how hardcore do I want to go in this ecosystem.
Okay. Well, I hope you'll agree that was an awesome panel and high quality. So stay with us because we've got another panel starting in about 5 minutes talking about Messenger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Thank you.